Chapter 7, The Jungvolk, 1933. I ran down the stairs. At the front door, I pressed the Schneider's bell. 3 times short, once long. That was our signal. Then I sauntered through the front garden, past Polycarp, and walked to the corner. Friedrich arrived almost at once. "Thanks a lot," he said breathlessly. "Thanks so much for fetching me." Side by side, we walked in the direction of the park. We were early and didn't have to hurry. "I'm so glad, you know," Friedrich began afresh. "But you mustn't tell my father. He doesn't like my going there. You know, I saw you all marching through town with your flag and singing. I think that's really great. I'd love to take part, but father won't let me join the young folk. Still, maybe he'll change his mind after a while." We ambled through the park. Through the trees, we could make out the brown brick buildings of the old fortress. "What's on for today?" asked Friedrich. "More war games?" I shook my head. "Wednesdays are club nights. We can bring strangers only on Wednesdays. But you'd better not mention right away that you're a Jew." Friedrich put his arm around my shoulder and whispered to himself, "Oh, I'm so pleased." "Our squad leader's a great fellow," I told him. "He's been a member for ages. You can see his neckerchief pinned to the wall of the clubhouse. It has a cut right through the middle. He wore it during a raid. A communist tried to stab him, but his knife only cut the cloth, and he wasn't harmed." Friedrich fished around in his trouser pocket. "I almost forgot about this," he shouted, pulling out a black, 3-cornered scarf. "I swiped it from Mother's first aid box," he said, smiling. We stopped at the next park bench. I showed Friedrich how to roll his scarf according to regulations, then I placed it under his white-collared shirt so that only a corner hung out in back. I was just about to tie a knot in front when Friedrich pulled out a ring from his trouser pocket. It was made of brown leather and had a swastika stamped on it. Not even our squad leader owned such a grand ring. Friedrich proudly slid the ring over the rolled ends of the triangular scarf all the way to his neck. When he saw how I envied him his ring, he was still more delighted. He pushed out his chest, fell into step with me, and together we marched through the old fortress gate to the parade grounds. The others were already in the courtyard. They didn't pay any attention to us. Most of them wore short pants and any old striped or checked shirt. Only a few owned the regulation brown shirt. Strictly speaking, no one was properly dressed. The only thing everyone had in common was the triangular neckerchief with the corner showing below the short shirt collar and back. With shining eyes, Friedrich leaned against the wall beside me. "I'm so glad I can be here," he said, touching his neckerchief ring. My platoon leader arrived at last. He was about 15 and wore the regulation uniform we all longed for. I reported that I had brought a new boy. "In order," he said, "but I don't have time now. We'll take care of it later." Then he ordered us all to fall in line. We fell in line. I pushed Friedrich into the back row next to me. "Turn right, close it up, single file." There was some confusion because Friedrich didn't quite know how to march in single file. He got a few jabs in his ribs before he stamped behind me up the narrow winding stairs. Our clubhouse was a windowless room in the old fortress. A strong bulb dangled from the ceiling by 2 wires. Entering, one eye met the picture of Adolf Hitler on the wall, facing the door. Underneath the picture, our squad leader's famous scarf was stretched to full width. The many fingers that had reverently passed over the fabled cut had widened it to a hole so large you could stick your head through it. On the right wall hung 2 crossed poles, their black pennants fastened with pins to the wall. The white embroidered victory rune, sign of Jungvolk, looked resplendent in the center of the black pennant. On the wall beside the door, a platoon leader had tried his hand at Maxims and watercolor. "Be more than you seem," was one, and a second read, "Fight for your life." Friedrich shivered with excitement as he sat down beside me on the wooden bench. "Great," he whispered. "I'm so glad I'll be joining Jungvolk and become a pimp." We had hardly sat down when my platoon leader followed. "Attention!" Everyone jumped up and stood facing Hitler's picture. The platoon leader spoke to our squad leader. With heavy tread, our squad leader stepped beneath the picture. He lifted his hands. "Sieg Heil, boys! Sieg Heil, Frauenführer," we replied. Friedrich shouted it with such enthusiasm, his voice broke and tears came into his eyes. "Sit down," ordered the squad leader, and above the din of dropping onto the benches, he began. "Boys, I brought someone special to our club evening tonight. He is Special Delegate Delco from the district office of our party. He wants to talk to you about something very important." Only then did I notice the hunchback. He was so short, he didn't stand out among the boys. He was covered head to toe in brown. He even wore brown boots. The visor of his cap, also brown, hid his face. He walked to the front, but he couldn't see the whole room. In the end, the platoon commander brought an empty orange crate. The hunchback climbed onto it and began his speech. "Nymph of our Führer," the voice was unpleasantly shrill. "I have been delegated to talk to you today about the Jews. You all know Jews, but you all know too little about them. This will be different an hour from now. You will then know what a danger Jews represent for us in our nation." Friedrich sat bent slightly forward beside me on the bench. His eyes hung on the speaker, his mouth slightly open. He devoured every word. The hunchback seemed to feel this, and soon it looked as if he were addressing his speech to Friedrich alone. His words were effective. He was able to paint everything in such colors that we believed it was actually happening before our eyes. What he now told us made even those with colds forget to cough. "With a large knife," he said, "a knife as long as my arm, the Jew priest steps beside the poor cow. Very slowly he raises the knife. The beast feels the threat of death. It bellows, tries to wrench free. But the Jew knows no mercy. Quick as a flash, he drives the wide knife into the animal's neck. Blood spurts, it befouls everything. The animal is in a frenzy, its eyes fixed, staring in horror. But the Jew knows no pity. He does not shorten its suffering. He wallows in the pain of the bleeding animal. He wants that blood. And he stands by and watches the animal slowly bleeding to its pitiful death. It's called kosher butchering. The God of the Jews demands it." Friedrich bent so far forward, I was afraid he'd topple off the bench. His face was pale, his breathing labored, his hands clutched his knees. The hunchback told of murdered Christian children, of Jewish crimes, of wars. Just listening made me shudder. Finally, the speaker ended. One sentence. One sentence. Only I want to hammer into your brains. I will repeat it until it comes out of your ears, and repeat it. The Jews are our affliction. And again, the Jews are our affliction. And another time, the Jews are our affliction. Sweating and exhausted, the little special delegate stood on his orange box. It was completely quiet in the room. Then the hunchback pointed to Friedrich. "What is the sentence?" he asked him. Friedrich didn't move. "What is the sentence?" the speaker asked more sharply. Friedrich sat stiffly and hunched forward beside me on the bench. "What is the sentence?" The voice of the special delegate cracked. He hopped off the box and walked toward Friedrich with a pointed finger. Friedrich swallowed. The hunchback stood before him. His eyes stabbed at Friedrich. He grabbed his scarf and slowly pushed the ring upwards. "What is the sentence?" he barked. In a faint voice, Friedrich said, "The Jews are our affliction." The hunchback hauled Friedrich up from the bench in one movement. "Stand up when I talk to you," he screamed in his face, "and reply loudly, if you please." Friedrich stood up straight. He was still pale. In a clear voice, he proclaimed, "The Jews are our affliction." There wasn't a sound. Friedrich turned around. The ring was in the hunchback's hand. Friedrich left the club unhindered. I stayed where I was.